Mark, you could have been way more clear. What do you mean? People are claiming that you presented Jesus as God in some way. That's exactly what I did. Well, nowhere in your entire gospel does Jesus claim to be God. Well, even in how I opened the gospel, right? The prophecy from Malachi and Isaiah that promise a messenger and then God would come and visit the temple just like he did the first temple. That's how I opened my gospel, so that we would make the connection that after John, God comes. Except instead of God, it's Jesus. Right? Wasn't that clear enough? No. Well, okay. So following that, I mentioned that Jesus went and summoned fishermen to himself to then tear down Israel's captors, right? They took on demons and death and disease, which is exactly what Jeremiah 16, God claims that he would do. He would summon fishermen to tear down the tyrants that were holding Israel captive. So not only did I introduce Jesus with prophecies about the arrival of God, I then followed it up with a clear identification of Jesus doing what God said he would do from Jeremiah. Didn't that make the connection? Okay, well, how about Israel's Shema? I mean, Israelites know that. They know that there's only one God. And so the scribes recite this to themselves when Jesus says he has the authority to forgive sin. But Jesus doesn't rebuke them for that because he agrees with them. And then he demonstrates not only can he forgive sin, but he can heal disease, just as God is described in Psalm 103. Right? Wasn't that connection clear? Okay, I understand being ambiguous. So Hosea and Isaiah both present God as being Israel's bridegroom, right? And so when Jesus' disciples are criticized since they don't fast like John the Baptist or the Pharisees' disciples, Jesus says, how can they fast while the bridegroom is with them? Nope, not ringing any bells. Okay, the Psalm 29. In the Old Testament, God is the one who commands the waters. Whenever he speaks, the waters do something amazing. And Psalm 29 is very clear. The voice of the Lord is over the waters. He sits enthroned above the flood. It is Israel's God who commands the winds and the waves, right? So when the disciples were afraid in the boat and Jesus stood up and told the storm to be still, and the wind and waves stopped, it was clear, right? You saw the connection? No, still not. Okay. Um, okay, so God in the Old Testament passes by Moses and he passes by Elijah. And that's when he shows his glory. In Mark 6, when the disciples are afraid at sea again, even though Jesus has just multiplied manna and fed this giant Israelite crowd, but instead of it coming down from heaven, it comes directly from his hands. Jesus then is seen walking on water, and he passes by his disciples the exact same way God passed by Moses and Elijah in the Old Testament. No, not ringing any bells. Well, then Jesus, when he passes by, he climbs into the boat with them, and then he quotes Isaiah 41 when Yahweh says, "Do not be afraid, for it is I am your God." And so Jesus climbs in the boat and says, "Do not fear, for I am, or it is I." Still unclear. In the words of Adam Sandler, I just don't know what you want me to say. Well, you should have written it with the 21st century in mind instead of the audience in the first century who would have actually known their Old Testaments. It's about us.